Thank you, USIBC, for putting together such a fantastic summit and this very, very relevant session. We just heard some interesting remarks coming from the government, and why not take it forward with what the industry has to say? And after all, we're living in super exciting times. Well, we know global healthcare demands are increasing. We know innovation cycles are accelerating. We know geopolitical uncertainties are growing. Well, that would be an understatement. but these are, in many ways, super exciting times to be talking about how we can see cross-border collaborations, and what better than India and the United States, the largest and oldest democracies of the world, and talking about two sectors that have clearly been sectors where we've already seen those synergies play out between the two nations. So biotech and pharma, and that's what we're here to cover today. But I think what's exciting about today's panel is that we're moving beyond what we have seen so far. When we talk about cross-border collaborations, we talk about synergies, we talk about all of these are age-old conversations. But what's happening today in India is definitely a new trend. And that's something we hope our panelists will touch upon, will educate us, will help us understand on how the world is changing and how India is changing, and how the partnership between these two incredible nations is evolving, I would say. So let's start by bringing in David first. David, we're hearing GCC, I would say, more often than we would have thought. Okay, every day there is a GCC summit in India. Every other day we're talking about the accelerating trend of GCCs, and we know that Eli Lilly is in the midst of it. First, explain to our audience the concept of GCCs. Why is it different from, say, the earlier boom of back offices? But also explain to us why India is so strategically positioned to take advantage of this so-called GCC boom, and of course, how you all are playing a big part in that. Over to you, David.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sada, and a big thank you to USIBC for the invite here today. I mean, GCCs have been around for a very, very long time, and traditionally, the back office vision of we're going to outsource or move low value work to an offshore location, that's a decades old analogy. Now, and for Eli Lilly, we've been here since 2016. We've been here because of the ecosystem that the Honourable Minister mentioned a while ago. For us, the confluence of having technology, having life science capability, biotechnology experience, allows us to create a GCC organization that can have a high impact for our global organization. For us, we cover functions such as our global drug development. We have commercialization capabilities, and we've got a large technology presence here, which enables Eli Lilly at a global level to be successful in its goal of developing innovative medicines that can make people's lives better around the world. And I can say, being a member of the LCCI team here in Bengaluru, the ability for us to read news of new medicines being launched in different geographies, new medicines to treat untreatable diseases, the pride that we feel in knowing that our teams here have helped enable that innovation is critically important.
And if I could just build on that a little to talk about the strategic ability of India to continue to capture that trend, and specifically Bengaluru. Because it's important to understand that when you talk about, I would say, highly research-oriented, innovation-led, deep tech sectors like the one that you operate in, what makes Bengaluru so unique in India or in the world, and what makes India unique?
Yeah, I mean, we've spoke about the two Ps earlier. I think the people is critical. Having a flow of talent from universities and institutes, some of which were mentioned earlier, having an ecosystem of manufacturing and of science and research organizations that we can then tap into from both a talent and a partnership perspective. That ecosystem doesn't exist in every country. And certainly Karnataka and Bengaluru have done a great job in being able to bring the corporates with the academia, with startup ecosystems to make that happen.
All right, so the two Ps, and we're clearly seeing that play out very nicely and that trend accelerating. The other term and the buzzword that we hear a lot now is CDMO, or as Kenneth corrected me, it's CRDMO, right? Now, India being positioned as a CRDMO hub. First, explain to our audience, Kenneth, what does that signify? Why is that trend accelerating? And again, once again, just like we're talking about India being a GCC hub, how is India evolving as a CRDMO hub?
Sure, and also thank you for having me today. So for those who are not familiar, that's Contract Research, Development, and Manufacturing, CRDMO organization. And I first became involved in what we would call outsourcing, so the innovation piece and the development piece from the US into India about 20 years ago. And when it first started, and I think you also mentioned this, it was very much about the cost arbitrage. It was what can we get done very efficiently and very inexpensively in a certain part of the world. And we were outsourcing significantly to both India and China, right? What's happened over the last several years is that there's been an evolution where people are coming to organizations like ours, not because we're cheap, but because we're good at what we do and we can help them to solve their problems. And that is a significant change. And it requires a change in the way that we think about building the infrastructure, especially the people and the talent. So what we can do today in my organization, we're not unique, but I think we're well positioned for this, is to be able to help pharmaceutical companies and early innovator companies make the move all the way from identifying the starting point of a disease, the cause of a disease, and how we're going to go after that medically, whether it's a traditional small molecule or a biologic or some other modality, to find the starting point and optimize that to a clinical candidate that is viable, can be evaluated to go into patients, to run the clinical trials here in India on the patient population, and then to take that all the way through to commercialization with both the active ingredient, the drug substance, and the drug product. So again, it's about bringing expertise to help these organizations solve their problems in a very time, cost, and risk mitigated, effective way. So that's really where we've come today.
Brilliant, and that takes me to the next question around innovation, IP, regulatory convergence that we're seeing, and also will naturally segue into the buzzword AI. But I think, Suresh, for the fact that AbbVie is a globally recognized giant for its innovation in complex therapies, whether you're talking about immunology, oncology, do you think India has a strong enough IP ecosystem that is supporting some of the long-term investments that you're making? And I would say let's first talk about what's working and then obviously what needs to be done to strengthen that.
So I think maybe I'll touch upon the innovation piece first. I think India has been the pharmacy of the world. So we are all proud, that we are the third in volume in terms of being the pharmacy of the world, but we are 14th in value in terms of this thing. But then when we say that we are the pharmacy of the world and supplying, for example, 47% of the US generics, we are still playing in 5 to 6% of the global pharmaceutical market, which is around $1.4 trillion, but we are playing in a $90 billion market with our generics, even though we manufacture so much of volumes. So I think the government of India has now clearly seen that we need to move up the ladder like what China has done and what South Korea has done in terms of innovating out of India, rather than being the pharmacy, moving up the value chain. I think that was very clearly understood. And then they have also discovered that there is a lot of risk capital involved in innovation, which is why the government of India has come up with the PRIPS program, Pharmaceutical Research and Innovation, Investment in Research and Innovation in Pharmaceuticals. And that's 5,000 crore outlay now on people who are interested in doing clinical research, bringing their products from the lab to the market. And that's a big step which we have taken. And that is a similar journey which South Korea has done probably a decade back, where they put $2 billion saying that let's innovate out of Korea. So today, if you look at the big deals happening, it's China, where a huge amount of in-licensing is happening, and it's Korea, because they started a lot more earlier than us. But we have started that journey, and I always believe that it's like the 1983 World Cup. You win the cup once, then suddenly it opens the doors for many people to, sort of come by and start discovering new innovative products. And we have started that journey now. In terms of AbbVie's this thing, I think we have been always an innovative company. We are probably the top 3 or 4 companies in the world, just behind Eli Lilly in terms of market cap. But we are very strong in immunology, oncology, and innovative products. Now, if you look at India, I think one of the key requirements is that today when you look at any innovative product, and that's something which we can do on a state level or a national level, and with more inclusion in the Ayushman Bharat, is access is an issue. Whatever you do, it's like 5% or 10% of the patients would get access to innovative therapies, whatever any company does. So there needs to be more inclusion in Ayushman Bharat, which will enable more access to happen. And thereby, because of the large population we have, as far as AbbVie is concerned, we believe it's a very attractive market to be, not only now, but also for the future. In terms of very quickly on the regulatory piece, I think a lot of convergence is happening in terms of India becoming a full member of the ICH, for example. A lot of discussion and partnership with the US to make sure there's convergence in the regulatory processes. The Rule 101, which enables us to launch products in India but not need to do a phase 3 trial, but still have to do a phase 4 trial. I think we need to have better alignment on that. As well as the new drug and clinical trials rules of 2019, I think a lot of progress has been made on the regulatory piece.
Amazing, and we will talk regulations a bit more as we move along. But I do want to touch upon AI now and bring in David here once again, because when you talk about the convergence of what's happening, and in many ways, traditional legacy businesses now leveraging emerging technologies like AI. So David, we know that the Eli Lilly GCC has been doing a lot of work here in AI, and the conversation there really is the synergy between India and the US. And we hear all sorts of conversations. AI is only happening in the US, in the Valley, India is dead, there's nothing on AI. Or the other extreme view of, the entire AI adoption is actually taking place in India. And India is where the market is when it comes to, at least understanding AI. So in the midst of all this, I would say, hype around what's going on in the AI space, would want to understand from you on the ground, in reality, how are you seeing AI adoption play out, say, at the Lilly GCC?
Yeah, I would say adoption, but I would say also the ability to develop. So we would have 1,100 or so tech folks that sit here in Bengaluru, and we're not the largest headcount heavy company, so that's about 2% of our organization.
So correct me, you're saying 1,100 are at your GCC, and these
just
are
in technology, just in our tech team.
Yeah.
And there's many of our global initiatives that are co-run out of here. So I guess for me, the value of the GCC that we have is cross-functional collaboration. So from a pharmaceutical life cycle perspective, many of the functions have a presence here. So we would have our technology teams here with our business teams here working in global squads with our US primarily corporate folks developing, designing what those new technologies that are going to come to fruition are. Not a surprise, many of those new platforms will have AI at the core, and we've seen significant progress in our adoption at a global level, but using tools that were co-developed from here.
So is it just tools, or is it also the talent that you're using? So my question there is that, does the talent, are legacy US companies as well as new age tech companies still seeing India as the talent hub when it comes to even AI? And is there also, while India could be a talent hub because we are a talent hub for developer ecosystem, we are a talent hub for engineers, right? And that has been India's strength. But right now, AI is a new technology, so everybody needs to be reskilled and everybody needs to reorient the way they're thinking. So is there an effort there towards ensuring India remains well ahead of the curve when it comes to AI and skilling there, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I would say for me, there's a curiosity and there's an experimentation element to that, right? And I think for us at Eli Lilly, we focused on giving people tools to help them with that curiosity and to help them with the experimentation. An example, every person in the organization has Copilot and access to that Microsoft product. We've built a tool out of India that allows people to play with a chatbot. We call it Chat in a Box, but effectively the framework to allow people around the world to go and figure out how do chatbots work, and that will help us come up with more innovative ways of using the technologies.
So staying with the talent and AI piece, Suresh or Kenneth, if any of you would like to jump in, because I've heard a common theme come across in the panel today that it's no longer about cost arbitrage, right? So India is no longer going to play the cost arbitrage game, and so that is a yesterday story, so to say. So what's a today and tomorrow story that we should look out for? What are the trends here? Because if it's not the cost arbitrage, is it the mere talent availability that we're playing on now? The fact that the talent does exist here, is that a competitive advantage and differentiator, or is it something else that we're missing?
Yeah, so India's got the youngest population in the world, okay? We have, I think, almost 70% of our population is less than 30 years of age. I think that's the biggest human capital we have got. And the fact that Bangalore has got so much of engineering colleges, medical colleges, it's really the talent hub. You know, whether it's Hyderabad or Bangalore, these are the two cities sort of competing with each other for GCCs now. And no longer are they back office functions. They are part of the global teams sitting here. So today, AbbVie does not have a GCC because we are a newer entrant into India, per se. But we have 6,500 people working across different organizations, doing business analytics to pharmacovigilance for the globe is done out of India, and multiple things. So I think it's just the fact that we have the youngest population in the world. Take China, for example. I think there was a paper called Vision 2020, and because of whatever policies, I mean, it's a global thing, they have negative 20 million working age population now. So we are the only one who has got a positive 40 million working age population who we are trying to utilize now with GCCs.
I would give maybe one other perspective, which is the technical talent and the data analytics, AI development, all of that. I think that also needs to be paired, and we see that evolving too, with leadership talent. We go to some of the top national institutes from an MBA perspective, and having that talent then co-locate in the US with our US colleagues through short-term assignments or long-term assignments, and then bring that context back, continues to help the evolution of the capability and the impact that the center here can have.
Fantastic. And Kenneth, I want you to specifically talk about, at a time when we're seeing innovation cycles shortening, we're seeing tech integration becoming very vital. We're seeing India playing the technical talent game, so to say. So how are we going to continuously build on this trend in a way that you can use India for delivering, what is required for global clients sitting out of here?
Yeah, thank you. So as we think more about approaching the companies that we work with, and again, we're a contract research development manufacturing organization, so we don't have an internal pipeline. We're effectively an 8,000 person pharmaceutical company for hire, right? And the type of talent that you need to be able to do that work requires a lot of specialty training. So chemists, biologists, pharmacologists, safety tox specialists, and they don't grow on trees, right? Yeah. So India has 1.4 billion people, but not all of them are chemists and biologists. And they certainly don't come out of school with the skill sets that we need them to have in order for them to be ready. So we have our own training academy at the organization. Biocon itself has a broader training academy. But there was a comment earlier by one of the speakers that there's a government program for a partnership between industry and academia. I think we really need to seize that and take advantage of it and build some type of process that will allow us to scale. The world is knocking on our door. There is so much work coming from China to India today, and it's come in 4 successive waves in the 6 years that I've been working in India. The first was during the start of the pandemic in China when they shut down and the work came to us. And the second was when the pandemic spread through Europe and the US and they stayed home and the work came to us. The third one was when Russia invaded Ukraine because there was concern about geopolitical instability, and the fourth one was the Biosecure Act. On behalf of the United States, I apologize for that one. But with all of that work and that potential coming to India, it's become really challenging to find the talent to scale. We can build the buildings, we can buy the instruments, but finding the people and going through the entire employee life cycle, we have to identify them, hire them, sure, develop them, train them, retain them, because there's a tremendous amount of competition among the organizations. So I would say that that's going to be key to India's success and India's rise. It's having the right people with the right skill sets, not just a lot of people. And then the second half of your question about leveraging AI, machine learning. So we do a lot of that in the context of therapeutic discovery and development. We use what we call multi-parameter optimization, or MPO. It's a critical part of the process, and it's enabling us to, well, you have what we call the design, make, test, analyze cycle. The trick is, can you make the cycle go faster with better thinking and planning, but can you also have fewer cycles to get from starting point to end point? And so we are using these tools, and I know that we're time limited today, but I'd be happy to discuss this with you or other folks at another time.
No, super. I'm sure we would want to go deeper in that, and I know time is up. I've had 2 reminders, but I'm going to have closing comments for sure, because it's not every day you have a minister sitting in audience listening to you. And you mentioned 2 stakeholders, industry and academia, and I am a big proponent of the third stakeholder, which is government. Running the Startup Policy Forum, which is a new industry platform that's serving the new economy, and you have, traditional traditional legacy businesses that have built old economies and yet, now in some ways converging with new economy, we want to hear from you what the government can do to support this. And it's music to our ears that the world is knocking on India's door. But quick last closing comments from the three of you gentlemen on the one ask from government, the one thing that the government can do, and I can tell you this government's listening. Anybody? Yeah.
I mean, for me, I would say, we're proud to be part of the Bengaluru and the Karnataka infrastructure here. And, we're excited to see policies continue to evolve, particularly the GCC policy that was launched late last year. So I think keeping that ambitious strategy to continue to grow is what we're really hoping for.
I think for me it's intellectual property, because along with innovation comes intellectual property. We need the patents being granted much faster, no frivolous pre-grant opposition, and of course, we will continue to invest in India for sure.
So I'd say for us, it's simplification in terms of just the ease of doing business. But as we noted before, in terms of the talent, we should definitely partner together to figure out how to make that work, because we can scale, but we can't scale without the right people. And we need to put a system together that's going to flood the market with the people with the right skill sets, so that instead of competing with the other Indian companies, we can all succeed together.
Brilliant, and I can see USIBC has its task cut out now, because the recommendations have come, the right stakeholders are in the room, and I think we just need to roll it into action and make sure that we're strengthening the US-India partnership in these very critical sectors of pharma and biotech. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us for this great discussion. Thank you.